Hey, so a lot of you guys have been asking lately about drawers and how I construct them. Now I have done a drawer video in the past, but that was about 2 years ago, and I have changed things a little bit in how I do drawers as of late. Times change, we learn new things, we adapt, things become hip, things become hop, things become happening. Anyways, I thought it was high time that I do another video showing you guys how I do drawers. So I'm going to show you how I construct my drawers, which are like this. Pretty simple, pretty fast, pretty strong, but I'm also going to give you some other options to make your drawers a little fancier. So we're going to go through a couple different drawer options. I'm going to show you my drawers and how I make drawers. So follow along, and there's links in the video description to all the stuff you're going to need. Okay. All right, so the first drawer I'm going to show you how to make is the drawer that I make 99% of the time. Now, I came from a cabinet making background, from a custom furniture background, and when I had a lot of client work, speed was an issue. I needed to get things done. I needed to get them out of the shop. So I was looking for a way that I could construct drawers quickly, but still create an incredibly strong drawer that still looked somewhat visually appealing. So this is how I normally would make drawers.
Whenever I make drawers, I'm usually using undermount drawer slides, so I have to use either 1/2 inch or 5/8 inch material because, well, that's what the undermount drawer slides require. The first thing I'm going to do is cut my 5x5 sheet of Baltic birch into long strips. Now, the size of these strips is going to be completely determined by the height of my drawer box. If my drawer box is going to be 8 inches, well, I cut an 8-inch strip. Wrestling 5x5 sheets of Baltic birch through the table saw can be a little unruly, so when I cut these strips, I like to put the fence on the left side of the blade so I have more support for my sheet of plywood. After cutting all of my strips, next we're going to cut a groove towards the bottom of each one of those strips to hold our bottom panel of our drawer. So I set the blade a 1/2 inch away from the fence, because most undermount drawer slides need a 1/2 inch of space on the bottom for the clips that hook the drawer to the slide. And then I'm going to set the blade height to 1/4 inch. I'm going to run all of my pieces through, creating a nice little groove 1/2 inch up from the bottom of each strip of plywood. It looks something like this. Now this is only 1/8 inch wide, and my bottom panel is going to be 1/4 inch plywood. So then I have to jog the fence over to get that 1/4 inch groove. You might be saying, why don't you just stick a dado stack in there and cut it all at the same time? Well, I like to do it this way because I can really hone in on just the right fit for that bottom panel. This is why I always cut a scrap piece of ply with that groove so I can, test the fit. Once I have the fit just where I want it, I run all the remaining pieces through, giving myself a nice 1/4 inch groove along the bottom of each strip. Now it's time to cut those strips into our various parts and pieces for our drawer box. Getting the measurements for this is pretty easy. If you're using undermount drawer slides, you just measure the distance between the two slides right here, and that's going to be your front and back pieces of your box. Then the side pieces are just going to be whatever length drawer slide you're using. These are 18-inch drawer slides, so we'd cut the sides at 18 inches. Obviously, these measurements are going to be slightly different if you're using side mount drawer slides, so you'd have to adjust accordingly. Next, I take my pieces over to my miter saw and I set up a stop block so I can make repeated cuts. But before I start slicing this piece up willy-nilly, I like to kind of take some rough measurements and determine how many pieces of each size I can get from one section. This way I can get the most bang for my buck when it comes to material, and I'm not wasting a bunch of wood. These drawer boxes, for example, are 18 inches on the side and 23 on the front. I could cut 3 18-inch pieces from one 60-inch board, but then I'd have 6 inches of waste on the end. Or I could cut 2 18-inch pieces and one 23-inch piece and only have 1 inch of waste on the end, which makes more sense. Now, I have changed the way I've done drawers as of late. In the past, I used to take the back section of the drawer, this section right here, and I would cut a notch out on either side so that the drawer slide could slide through that back panel. Basically, that looked something like this. Cutting a small little notch the exact width of the drawer slide, so that the box could fit nice and snug over those slides, and the slides could engage the clip that's mounted on the bottom of the drawer. And this really isn't a bad way of doing things, but I've found a way that works a little bit better for multiple reasons, and I'll show you why. Now, instead of cutting a notch on either end, I just slice off the entire bottom. So this little section that used to hold the drawer bottom, I just get rid of it. I'll explain exactly why I do this a little later on, but for now we gotta cut the bottom panel for our drawer box. Getting measurements for the size of panel you need are pretty easy. You just take the measurement of your front box piece and you add a 1/2 inch because we put a 1/4 inch groove on either side. Then you take a measurement for the side panel and you subtract a 1/4 inch. Again, I'll explain why here in a little bit. Then with those measurements in your head, you go over to the table saw and we just cut our panels out of 1/4 inch Baltic birch because we're using Baltic birch for the rest of our drawer and we want it to be all matchy-matchy. Once we have that bottom panel cut, it should fit into our 4 box pieces and create, well, a nice box. If it looks like a triangle, you've gone horribly wrong somewhere and you should probably start over and possibly consider quitting woodworking altogether. To give you another idea of what that back piece looks like after slicing off the bottom, it should look something like this, fitting right between your 2 side pieces, and that bottom panel rests nice and flush on the bottom of that back piece. Ooh. Ah. Next, I like to sand everything before assembly, especially the inside pieces. You can wait to sand the outside pieces until after you assemble the box, but it's much easier if you sand the inside of the pieces before assembly. To assemble, we're just using a little bit of glue and a 16 gauge brad nailer. I know that sounds crazy, but it's quick, it's easy, and it's actually incredibly strong. One thing to note, however, is don't use nails that are too long. For 1/2 inch material, I like to use 1.5 inch nails. That means I'm only getting 1 inch of penetration from one piece into the other, but that is plenty. If you're using 2-inch long nails, the chances of blowing a nail out the side of your box are much, much greater. Now, the reason I started cutting the back panel of my drawer boxes differently is this. I can now remove that bottom panel, which means that finishing the drawer boxes is so much easier. Because I can sand the inside, I can apply a finish to the inside, and I don't have to worry about as many tight corners and cracks. I can pre-finish the bottom panel, and then once everything's finished, I can slide the whole thing back together. Now, because we nailed the box together, we do have a few nail holes that we have to take care of. For that, I'm just using this plastic wood product from DAP. It seems to work pretty good and doesn't really shrink after it dries. I'm just using the natural color, but obviously if you're staining your drawer boxes a different color, you can find a color that matches. After letting that material dry for just a little bit, I sand it all flush, and with that, our drawer box is complete.
You know, it's really not a bad looking drawer. And for most general cabinet purposes, this drawer is great. Yes, it's only Baltic birch plywood, but that means there's no voids. It actually finishes up really nice. A lot of the stuff I was making was kind of mid-century inspired anyways, and so the plywood fits right in with that. The one adjustment I have recently made when making the drawers is the removable bottom. The reason this is such a big deal is because it is a pain to finish completed drawers. I mean, like, get finish on them. But being able to remove the bottom is super nice because you can finish the bottom separately. You can really easily get to the inside of your drawer that way from both sides, get finish on that. And then once it's dry, all you got to do is slide this back into place. Now, you might be thinking, just nailing a drawer together doesn't seem that strong, but it's the physics that's involved in the direction that you're nailing it. Because your sides extend all the way to the front on both sides, and then your nails come in this way, when you think about the physics of a drawer and how it's constantly being pulled, the nails are coming this way, the drawer is being pulled that way, so it can literally never be pulled apart because you're not pulling it in a direction that's going to pop those nails out. I've never had one of these drawers fail. I've never had a callback. I have these drawers in my house all over the place and they're still standing up great. But this method does have its limitations. For example, If you're making solid hardwood drawers, well, you're not going to want to nail them together because brad nails and solid hardwood, that doesn't always work out. But there's one small modification that you can make to this method that does make it possible to use this same method with hardwood drawers. And let me show you that right now.
So you're going to cut all your parts and pieces exactly the same as you did with your other drawers. The only difference is before assembly, you're going to add some pocket holes to both sides of your front and back piece. That way you can hook the entire thing together with those pocket holes and you're not going to see the brad nails on the outside. Now to assemble this, the easiest way I found to do that is to use a combination of wood glue and CA glue with an accelerator spray. This eliminates the need for clamps to hold the box in position while you get those screws in place. Basically, I just put a couple dots of accelerator spray and glue on either end of my panel with wood glue in the middle, press it together, the CA glue locks in place and will hold the drawer box until that wood glue dries. It also holds it sturdy enough that you can get your pocket screws into your drawer and get everything nice and secure. Now for plywood drawers, this doesn't look a whole lot different than the brad nailed version, other than a few little dots that we filled with wood filler. But it does give you the option to use hardwood, which is nice.
So simply switching out the brad nails for some pocket holes, we've made this construction method kind of universal because you can use pocket holes on any species of hardwood you want. You're going to get the same look and it's still pretty quick. Is it as fast as the brad nail method? No. But does it look the same? Yes. But let's say that you are doing hardwood drawers for maybe a fancier piece of furniture. You still don't want to waste time trying to hand cut dovetails or use a jig, but you want your drawers to look just a little bit nicer. Well, now I'm going to give you two options for nicer looking drawers that are still quick and easy to make, strong, and visually appealing. So check this one out.
One quick and easy way to elevate your drawer box design is to hook it together with box joints. Now for this, you're going to need a simple box joint jig. And lucky for you, I have a video on how to build this exact jig. I'll put a little link thingamawhatsit up in the corner right now. Now one big difference when hooking boxes together with box joints is that you have to take your measurement from outside corner to outside corner for both your side piece and your front and back piece because, well, the joinery is extending all the way on either side. So once you have all your pieces cut to the right size, you run them through that box joint jig, a zip zap zoop. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this because, well, I tell you exactly how to do every single step in the box joint jig video. But basically, the rundown, the dealio, the spiel is you just use the box joint jig to cut a bunch of box joints on both ends of all four of your pieces. Just like my plywood box, I cut down a little strip on that back piece, which makes my bottom panel removable, which makes finishing and sanding much easier. And then very carefully, I just hook everything together. Now I like to test the fit first, just to make sure I have a nice friction fit. Now you want these to go together fairly easily, tight, but not so tight that you really have to force them together. Because once you put the glue on, it will swell a little bit. Now you can avoid this by using epoxy to glue them together or hide glue, which won't swell the joint, but usually you can get away with regular water-based wood glue. The other thing you want to make sure is that you're not putting too much glue in each joint. I just put a little dot at the top of each joint, let it kind of run down in there, and this helps reduce squeeze out and makes cleanup much, much easier. There's nothing worse than a bunch of squeeze out on the inside of your joint. And I've found that 9 times out of 10, people are using way more glue than they actually need. After I get all the pieces glued together, I just put one clamp going in each direction to put a little, force inward. And then to ensure the entire drawer is square, I like to use these little square clamping thingamajiggers. Well, that ensure everything's square. Once I take it out of clamps, all I have to do is sand my box joint smooth. Now, if you have any gaps or visible cracks, the easiest way to fill those is just with a little wood glue. You squirt it in there, maybe rub it in with your finger, and then sand it with your sander, not hooked up to your dust collection. This will make a mixture of dust and sawdust, fill those cracks, and it'll look like, well, they were never even there. And just like that, we have a beautiful walnut drawer held together with nice box joints, and it just looks a little more elevated than the plywood option.
All right, so here we have a solid walnut drawer. I used walnut veneer ply for the base. It looks very nice. Instead of doing dovetails, we did the box joint, which, you know, I don't mind the look of, and it's a lot quicker than trying to hand cut dovetails or even use a jig to cut dovetails. You will notice that you can see a little hole on the front here where I cut that groove for the floating panel. But if you remember, our drawer face is going to go on the front. That's going to be completely covered up. So all you're really going to see is this nice side of box joints. Now, yes, this takes much longer than the other two methods I showed, which is why I normally don't do it unless a client specifically wants something to look a little more elevated, or I'm just making a really nice piece of furniture and I can't bring myself to throw nailed together plywood drawers in there. But this still takes a while. So I have one more method that is actually my favorite method for making fancier looking drawers. It's much quicker, and in my opinion, it looks nicer. So check this one out.
All right, now this is the easiest drawer that you can make and still have it look a little fancy. I'm gonna create all the pieces exactly the same way we did with the plywood version, only this time we're using hard maple. Now because I'm using a hardwood, obviously we can't pin nail it together, and I don't want to use pocket holes, well, because I want it to look fancier. So I'm gonna do something different. I'm gonna start by just gluing the entire box shape up, using that combination of wood glue and CA glue, so I don't have to wait for glue to dry with clamps on there and get all crazy. Just a few dots of CA glue, a little line of the wood glue, some accelerator spray, and push everything together and wait the 3 or 4 seconds it takes for that CA glue to dry. Now we have hooked together the framework for our drawer, but it's not very secure. Before I do anything else, I just double check that the drawer is square and not all wonky, which it's usually not if all your pieces are cut square and the right size. Next, I'm going to measure in from the outside of my side pieces, and I'm going to mark to add 4 screws, 2 in the front and 2 in the back. Now, to be honest, it's actually a lot easier to do this step before you hook the 4 pieces together, but I forgot and they were already glued together. So instead of doing this on the drill press beforehand, well, I just do it with the hand drill afterwards. Basically, everywhere you marked out that you're going to add a screw, you drill about a 1/2 inch deep hole with a 3/8 inch Forstner bit. And that's going to look something like this. Now in each one of those holes, we're going to add a screw. And the beauty of this construction method is that screws make the drawer incredibly strong. Now I know what you're thinking. You're probably saying, yeah, but screws are ugly. That's not going to look good. Well, don't you think I have a plan here? I mean, seriously, how long have you been watching the channel? I'm not just going to leave exposed screws. So after screwing our box together, we're going to go over to the drill press, and using some CMT plug cutters, we're going to cut some plugs to fill all those holes. We're going to be using a 3/8 inch plug cutter, and because we did hard maple for our drawer boxes, I thought it would look nice to use a contrasting wood, so I went with black walnut. These plug cutters are amazing, and they cut through wood like butter and make such clean plugs. They're available on my website, and yes, that was just a plug for some plug cutters, in case you were wondering. Anyways, after cutting a bunch of these walnut plugs, I go back over to my maple drawer box, just add a couple drops of glue into each one of those holes, and then by hand, just force those plugs into the hole and twist them around. That twisting motion is going to make sure the entire plug is coated with glue, and it's going to stay in there nice and tight. Once the glue dries, we need to trim off the excess plugs using a flush trim saw. Now there's a difference between a pull saw, which the blades look like this, in an alternating pattern, which means that if you try and flush trim something, you're going to mar up the surface of your work. What you want is a true flush trim saw. The blades are going to be in a straight line like this, and you can have that flush on the top of your workpiece without scratching it all up. You should be able to take your fingers and run it along the blade on either side and not feel any resistance or see any blood. These little flush trim saws from Szechuan, whatever the brand name is, are my favorite for cutting dowels, and yes, they're also available on my website. And yes, I did just give you a plug for something that helps you cut plugs. With all of those walnut plugs flush trimmed with our flush trim saw, you just give everything a nice sanding and it starts to look pretty clean like this. Isn't that a nice contrast? That dark walnut with that light white maple. Ooh, ah. And then another thing I like to do just to elevate the look of the drawer a little bit more is use a contrasting wood color for the drawer bottom as well. I like to match the species I used for the plugs on the drawer bottom. And now you got this nice walnut and maple combination going on, and boy, that looks fresh and clean. Now, up until this point, you might have been wondering, how do I secure these removable panels? Well, that's pretty darn easy. I just use this Armana countersink bit, and I add a few little 3/4 inch screws. And by a few, I mean 2. Now, in the plywood drawer, you could just brad nail the bottom in place, but I still like to use screws so that I can remove the bottom later on if I ever need to refinish the drawer. Or I just want to go bottomless for a while. And then the one final thing I like to do to all my drawer boxes, just to really take them to the next level, is brand them with my company logo. This is a great spot to put your brand that shows that you made the piece, but it's not like in your face. Like, look at me, I branded the top of your table, deal with it. You know, it's like nice but subtle.
This is probably my favorite way to make drawers when I want them to look a little fancier. But the funny thing is, we constructed these exactly the same as the very first drawer I showed you out of Baltic birch that was just pin nailed together. The only difference is we switched out the Baltic birch for hardwood. In this case, we used hard maple, and we switched out the pin nails for screws. But you're never going to be able to tell that we used screws because we took the time to pre-drill a nice hole and plug the screw holes with, contrasting wood color. And as I mentioned in the voiceover, if you want to make your drawers just really pop, the contrasting wood color that you use for the plugs, use that same wood for your drawer bottom. That contrast is just going to elevate the look and the overall design. And then finally, I like to stamp the edge of my drawers with my brand. It just takes it up a notch, makes it look real clean and professional. And there you have what appears to be a nice handmade drawer that you struggled and fussed over, which in all reality, all you did was glue and screw it together. But it'll match any high-end piece that you're making, and you can get it done quick, which in my book is nice because, well, I have ADD and I can't concentrate on any one thing for longer than 5 minutes. Sorry, I'm not looking at you. There's a spider crawling up the wall back there and it's making a really cool web. Anyways, hope you enjoyed that video. Check the links in the video description for any tools and supplies you might need. If you need help with those box joint things, you know, the things we did with the walnut thing, there's a video for that down in the video description as well. So go make some drawers and change your drawers. It's been a couple days. Starting to get stinky. Well, folks, we made it. It's the end of the year. It's the time to look back over the goals that you set at the beginning of the year and make new goals for next year. One goal that we had for this year was to grow our product base on our website. And thankfully, it was really easy to do because of Squarespace. Now, Squarespace is really cool because if you don't know how to make a website, they make it incredibly easy. So, for example, when we wanted to add more products to our website, the template we had originally didn't work, but we could just switch templates because all the templates are customizable. And the other cool thing is that no matter how many products we want to add to the website, it doesn't matter because with Squarespace, well, you can have unlimited products. So that's pretty cool. And I know what you're thinking. Yeah, but it's gonna take a lot of time. I don't got time for that. Well, it's the end of the year. Put it on your frickin' New Year's resolution that you're gonna build a website. And it doesn't take very long. You just pick a template, customize it to fit your needs, and boom, you got a website. The thing I really love about Squarespace is we're not always selling stuff online. Sometimes we're selling stuff in person as well. And with their point of sale, you can sell stuff directly to someone in person and it automatically updates the quantities on your website. So you don't have to keep track of your inventory in 2 places. So, with it being the end of the year, add making a killer website to your to-do list and get it done in 2024. And if you want to try it, just go to squarespace.com/bourbonmothwoodworking and you get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Cheers to cool websites and a kick 2024.